Welcome to Mark My Words, a podcast that not only aims to inspire and teach the listener about entrepreneurship, it also aims to give my guests an opportunity to talk about their unique journey in entrepreneurship and life. So join me and my guests as we meet at the crossroads on Mark My Words. So this past weekend, I went down to Naples, Florida, a few hours away from where I live, and I just so happened to go to a comedy show. One of my favorite comedians, Jamie Kennedy, was in town, and I've been laughing at his sketches and all of his content for years, and really got to thinking because I knew Leanne Linsky, the founder, CEO, the person that's making entrepreneurship and telling jokes the cross in order to go laughing to the bank. I got that from one of her videos. I totally butchered the joke, but it really got me to thinking while I was at that show, watching the openers, watching him, and just thinking about this opportunity to talk about Leanne, about what she does, which is basically giving comedians from all over the world a platform to hone their craft and to perform in front of virtual audiences, to write material, get feedback, and she can speak to all that much more, which I can't wait to listen to and discuss. But mainly, I was just thinking about it's. I feel like it's challenging to speak like this, and obviously challenging to just go up in front of a stage and speak like this and seriously and be yourself. But I can't imagine how hard, whether it's online or in front of a live audience, how hard it must be to not only speak in front of that audience and do all the things you gotta do to be an effective public speaker, but the end goal is to make people laugh and to give them, for lack of a better way to put it, that like meditation, that release to laugh. And it takes a real special person, even if you can probably get one or two laughs out of the crowd to accomplish that. And I don't really know where all this is going, but I just wanted to say it because I was thinking it. But Leanne Linsky is the founder and CEO of Plauzzable, spelled with two Z's in the middle. And she has a really great platform for comedians. She has a really great story, and I can't wait to hear about it. Leanne, welcome to Mark My Words.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you this afternoon.
Well, I am excited to talk to you, and I've been looking forward to this episode for a little while now. And this show is really about like the forks in the road for everybody and becoming an entrepreneur and really finding just that passion and figuring out, okay, I'm going to move on from corporate America or this place or that place in my life. I love hearing these stories and looking at like your LinkedIn profile. I feel like you and I are very close as far as how many jobs we've had because you, it sounds like you have had quite a few and just kind of going back to whatever year, yesteryear, let's hear what you might have been thinking as far as what you saw yourself doing as an adult.
Well, that's an interesting question because when I was a kid, I thought, oh, I'm going to be a mom. Or because people kept asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I always just threw something out there that would make them stop asking me. And I was like, I want to be president of the United States. So either way, it would get a laugh and people would stop bothering me and I could go about, being a kid again. But my mom my mom told me, you probably don't want to be the president because everybody knows everything about you and what you're doing and when you go to the bathroom. And as soon as she mentioned the bathroom, I was like, okay, I'm out. No more wanting to do that job. That's all it took. And so I didn't become president and I didn't have any children that I know of. So, so I didn't have any idea I was going to go into comedy. And I actually didn't start anything in comedy until I was 31. And before then, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I thought it'd be safe to go to school for business. And so that's what I majored in college. And I ended up working for you know, corporations, and one of which was a Fortune 500. I worked there for almost 13 years. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing funny about majoring in business. That's one thing I can say. I mean, I guess you're, again, to your joke, you're now combining some of these things and laughing to the
Hmm.
bank. So that's at least something. But yeah, it always fascinates me when I see somebody doing something that's just that type of career, because even I tried to major in business for a while, and we before the show we talked a bit about what I'm doing, and it's definitely not that. I wound up switching majors, and I never actually wanted to major in business. I always wanted to major in something television oriented, and that's a whole other story, because you get to hearing and maybe seeing people around you, you're influenced by that. You're like, oh, that's just what I'm supposed to do. And becoming a comedian, working in television are not like traditional careers at all.
Hmm.
It's not something that you get into. You have to have a passion for it, and you can't get into it thinking you're going to make tons of money, or
Yeah.
you're not going to be laughing to the bank.
Hmm. So
So,
true.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
one thing that really stuck out to me. So, you've been working at a lot of different jobs, or you did. At one point, you were doing kind of like cultural, I guess,
Development.
liaisoning, and that was
Yeah.
something that I thought about doing at one point and really pushed, because I was a manager and was really connecting with my staff and all that stuff, and was just curious to find out if that kind of interaction might have helped to stoke your interest and passion. Like, hey, I'm good at doing all this, but I'm also connecting in a humorous way, perhaps.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I've had a lot of jobs, but I was with one company for almost 13 years. So in that one company, I held many different positions, actually different roles. I started out in accounts, this job that you're talking about. So I'll tell you how I got there because it's kind of interesting. So when I first graduated college with my business degree, I ended up doing accounts payable for a company. And a year later, I went to this Fortune 500 company. I changed my job, same, but I continued doing accounts payable. So now I'm at this Fortune 500 company. It's a great organization. I really love the people, and I don't like accounts payable. I'm accounting is not my favorite subject, even though I was a business major. So I much prefer public speaking. I like presentations, marketing, all that. So I ended up going into market research. So I transferred to another department within the same company and I went into market research and I did that. And that's where we, look at all the competitors, put together feasibility reports for new products and did focus groups and surveys and all the things. A few years later, I was like, how do I grow? I want to go further in the company. And there was market research was a very small department. So the best thing for me to do was to go to another department. So I went into construction. They're like, yeah, Leanne, come on over. So I went and I was a construction coordinator for a short time, doing all the construction schedules. And so I was out in the field on construction sites. And then I became a back end superintendent for a while, where I took the house from drywall to finish and then oversaw that. And then from there, I became customer service manager, and I managed all warranty service on new homes and would go to home and do repairs and meet with customers. And then I became a manager and I had a whole area of the valley. During this whole time that I was working at this corporation, I was also, no matter what my role was, they knew I was always super talkative and I liked public speaking. So that made me the person in charge of planning all the quarterly meetings and all of the events and everything that involved big events, people organizing. So I did all of those things no matter what job title I had. So eventually, as we were growing, we were going to acquire another major corporation. We were buying out another company, and so they approached me and said, "Do you want to, what's your next step? Would you like to become a VP, or would you like to become a manager of cultural development?" And this whole manager of cultural development, this is before people were talking about company culture. This was back in the very early 2000s before it was like some overused buzzword. And they were like, because I was such a large part of the company culture, I knew everybody. I did all of the events. I planned all the things for families, all that kind of stuff. And it just seemed like a natural next step. And I was like, that sounds more exciting to me than, being a VP or a director of customer service, you know? So I was like, yeah, let's go. And they said basically I could make it whatever, how I could take the role and develop it. And so that was exciting to me. And so that's kind of how I got there. And it's because I took that job when we acquired another company. Now I was in charge of way more events. I took on all of and I'll get to the point, in a second, a bigger point of I was doing all the events. I was doing all the participating with HR and all the new hire onboarding. And we were bringing on like 60 new people a month. Like it was through a big boom, right, in construction and home building before the market crashed. And so I was busy and I managed the employee cafeteria. I did all these big things, and we found a positive correlation between how happy our customers were it was a positive correlation to how happy our employees were. And so we were like winning all these JD Power Awards and all this really cool stuff. So that's how I ended up in that job. However, when the market was taking a turn before the market crashed, I was the first person to be laid off because I had a huge budget. And what's going to get cut first? Things like parties and, a cafeteria and all of these other things. So, but during that time, especially when I had that particular role, people were very encouraging me to take comedy classes and things like that. So in 2001, I took my first comedy writing class at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where I had gone for my bachelor's degree. So I went back and I took this continuing ed class in comedy writing just so I could use it for one of my presentations. I loved it. Other coworkers said, "Hey, why don't you take a class with the Second City?" Well, I'm originally from the Chicago area, but I was living in Vegas. Well, the Second City had a training center they had opened in Las Vegas. I was like, "What? How wild is that?" Yeah. And I signed up for an improv class, and then I took all of the classes they offered, and then twice, and then some of them three times. So that's kind of how I got started into there. And the cultural development role was really key in that because I had a lot of freedom to be super creative in my job, and I could put my public speaking to use. So that's kind of the long story how to get there, but that's what happened.
So first of all, if I had a choice between VP or a more culturally influencer type of job, because the idea of being a VP sounds really uh gangsta. That's just, you're a baller if you're a VP,
Yeah.
I guess. But I mean, I think that would be kind of a tough choice for me as far as what I would pick. I don't know how that's relevant here, but I think it struck me just kind of how similar, even though I obviously didn't climb up the ranks quite like you did, I wound up having the same kind of impact on like my department and my staff.
Hmm.
And it was really rewarding, and it really, I think, impacted my life a lot, especially once I left that job and went off and started looking into doing a podcast and some things just on my own. It built me up, I think, in a similar way. Definitely sounds very different, but maybe similar way that it did for me, what happened to you. So it's amazing the different paths and walks of life, how it can still, you can find such a
Yeah.
similarity. And I have to say, I've been to Second City in Chicago once, and it was one of the most fun live experiences I've ever had. I like wound up becoming a part of the act, and I was just at that point, I'm like, okay, cannot, I'm not a performer. I can't
Yeah.
keep up with these people at all. They're too good. So
Yeah.
that
They're
really,
fantastic. Yeah.
oh my gosh. And if you came from that background, there's no doubt in my mind that you are fantastic as well. Like, oh my goodness, that's hard to do. So,
Thanks. Yeah. It's
but
it's definitely they make it look easy, right? And it's like, "Oh, that'd be so fun." And it was so fun. Like taking all those classes and then eventually I was laid off of that job that I told you about. And that's that from when I got laid off from that job, I ended up packing 2 suitcases and I moved to New York so I could do comedy all the time and continue taking classes at other theaters in New York, and I did. And it's just one of the most fun things that I was able to ever do because I mean, who doesn't want to spend half their day laughing? Like, and that was my job, that was what I was doing. I was like, how
well,
amazing.
I
Yeah.
I I can totally relate because who wouldn't want to spend their day watching stuff? So
Yeah.
you know where I come from. It's like, okay, we're gonna give you a bunch of shows, and it might not have always been something that was up my alley. I mean, where I worked for 10 years was like, okay, I'm watching documentaries. Some are awesome, some are like, I would never
Hmm.
watch this in a million years, but I'm getting paid to do that job. That's amazing. Who wouldn't want
Yeah.
to do that? So
Well, the funny thing is you got paid for it. I did not. So
big difference.
you're way smarter than I am. Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
did so
so
much for
talk
free.
So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about, okay, I'm Leanne Linsky. I'm gonna be a comedian. I'm gonna build myself up. I'm just right at ground zero. I gotta learn how to speak in that way rather than just I'm in front of a corporate crowd doing a job. How, what was the process? Was it rough? Was it easy? What
Hmm.
did you learn as you were honing your craft?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's like most things, right? We start at the bottom and we have to learn everything. So with comedy, when I started taking those classes, I was still fully employed while I was in Las Vegas. And so during that time, as I took those classes, um, m- me and other students got together and we would perform. We had regular shows that we booked, like we booked regular shows at a coffee shop. We didn't get paid. Comedians typically don't get paid, so we did a lot of free shows. There were some shows we got paid. We booked some free gigs. I had to perform in the rain. Half four of the six of us didn't show up. So it was me and one other person, my friend, who I will always remain friends with because we bonded over that. People yelling, "We can't hear you." It was terrible. It was like the worst. Um, yeah, it was, a lot of paying your dues. Honestly, that's a very big thing. And that's the only way to get better is doing it, doing it well, doing it not well, failing, get back up. It's like kids walking, right? Little kids, they're going to fall down a zillion times before they can walk around upright all the time. That's part of the process. And so, um, yeah, I did that for years. And then when I moved to New York, I was like, okay, I'm going to fully immerse myself and I'm going to learn as much as I can because learning at the second city is fantastic. We were in Vegas. performed a bunch of shows. Most of them were probably terrible for me. That I did with my fellow students in our group, and then um, in New York, took more classes at the Upright Citizens Brigade, at the Magnet Theater, um, put together more groups, did more shows, wrote sketch comedy. I ran an open mic for 7.5 years. I produced shows. My last year in New York, I produced 42 stand-up shows. And while I was in New York, I wrote and produced my one woman show, and I took it to DC and to Fringe. So it's honestly, I took tons of acting classes. I did theater. I remember like that process. Doing theater and memorizing lines is a whole different thing than doing improv and having no lines. You make them up. So all of it's a process. It is not easy. And I did it because I love doing it. And I held random jobs. I, did what I needed to do to make sure all my bills were taken care of and things like that. I did commercial work. I worked with agents. I worked with a manager. Yeah, not easy. It is a journey, and I don't recommend unless you really love, like, are passionate and really want to learn everything about it. There's so many people who expect instant success. Like, I did one thing. Why doesn't everybody buy millions of tickets? Well, that's not how life works.
No. And
Yeah.
I've never been a comedian and would probably not be very good at all. But I just, being the kind of person I am and thinking about just trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes, all I can think is, man, this can't be easy to do. And I know even some of the best make it look effortless, but I'm sure it is not. And you just really kind of laid out there, like, look, I had to not only work really hard at this and hone my craft and have gigs that I personally consider to just be really raw and not up to my standard. And when you started talking about some of that, it made me think of the first year of doing this podcast. So it was
Mhm.
a little bit similar where it's like, okay, people are encouraging me. They think I should do this. So I'm going to give it a crack. I came up with a theme and, got a mic and a lamp so that I could be
Mhm.
seen and heard. But I really didn't know what exactly, like, I didn't really know myself. I had to find myself with the gig that I was putting myself in. And I gotta imagine that it's a little bit the same way where sometimes you just gotta do it. You have to accept the fact that you're gonna make some mistakes and you
Oh
may
yeah.
trip up and you gotta dust yourself off and learn and just keep going. And that was my experience with this, and I'm still learning. This is the fourth year of this podcast, and I there's a night and day difference from
Yeah.
the way I was, but I'm still learning. I still have a long way to go. But if you're going to being a comedian, to me is like that's already like you're an entrepreneur. You're in the business of
Yeah.
yourself. So it's almost kind of similar. I almost feel like you're training yourself to be an entrepreneur, and you may
Mhm.
not have even seen it that way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, being a comedian, you're a freelancer. You're not employed by anybody in particular. You get gigs, you may get passed at a club, but that doesn't mean, it's not like working for a major corporation or something where you're collecting health insurance and things. No, it's show business. There's a reason it's called show business. And yeah, I believe you made some really good points. Like, you learn a lot about yourself, right? You become very resilient. There's lessons and everything. I don't think it's a destination. I think it's a journey. And like you said, there's always something to learn. And I agree. I've been doing comedy for over 20 years. I don't know anything. Like I always, the minute you think you know anyone I see, they're like, oh, I know everything. I'm like, okay. I don't. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. I'm a avid learner. I love learning. I think there's no way I'll know everything, but I'm going to try and absorb as much as possible. And there's always so much room for improvement, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, just again with this show, there is always room for improvement. There's so many things I still want to accomplish. Just in how I speak to guests, I feel like I've gotten a lot better, but I still have the occasional ums and ums and all that. Yeah,
Of
I guess you're
course.
not gonna ever be perfect, but I
Mm.
can tell compared to the early episodes, I feel like my personality is really shining through more and more versus that first
Yeah.
year where, yeah, my personality was there, but I am much more confident as well. So you have to be willing to learn and to keep trying and applying those lessons. And just as you pointed out, it's a journey. It's a journey you're still
Mhm.
on. And you came up with this really great idea, which I'm really interested in finding out what exactly was the fork in the road or the aha moment where you decided it might be better to trade in pitch decks for punchlines.
Well,
Like your material.
no, you mean I traded in yeah, I punchlines for pitch decks. It's kind of what it's turned out to be. So what happened was is I didn't set out, just like I didn't set out to be a comedian. It kind of happened. And that's I mean, I didn't even, when I started comedy, I didn't even want to do stand up. I just wanted to do improv and theater, right? But what happened was is after I had been living in New York for many years, I moved to the West Coast. And when I moved to the West Coast, I found myself spending all my time on the freeway and very little time on stage. I was like, this is silly. What am I doing? How do I solve this problem? So I wanted to solve my own problem. I'm like, I miss all of my friends and fellow comics on the East Coast. And here I am in in California, and I wasn't living right in LA. I was living LA County, but anywhere you go in LA, it's like 3 hours. Like, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. I'll see you next week. It's just traffic is hard. And in New York, I was spoiled by the amazing mass transit system and the ability to get around easily. But and it's hard, it's easier to write and read and do other things while you're on the subway, not so much on the highway. They don't like that. But I was like, how do I solve this problem? And I was like, well, what if I take it online? Now this is back in early 2015, right? And so way before COVID. And I was like, maybe I'll use Skype. And then I was like, Skype, right? But I was using Zoom for work because I was now working remotely for a company in New York while living in California. I was like, maybe I'll use Zoom. Life got lifey. I was producing shows in person. Uh, I started podcasting. I was doing all these other things. And eventually, this idea that was still rolling around in the back of my brain came back around again summer of 2019, BC, before COVID, still. And I was like, all right, maybe I gotta do something. So I talked to a few people. So by August, I set up a whole thing online. I had a WordPress website I had a coaching business at the time, and I automated my signups for my open mic, and I had it all on Zoom. And some people were like, this is amazing. And other people were like, why would I do that online? Then COVID happened. And everybody's like, oh, we're all doing that online, what you're doing right there. So I'm like, okay, this is great. And what I liked about it, and I talked to comedians like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Because it was never intended to replace in person. It was built to bridge a gap for me. A, I missed people I wanted to connect with, and B, I wanted to work out material without spending hundreds of dollars in gas and, you know, uh, years of my life sitting in traffic. So so although I did use the existing technologies, they weren't ideal for performing, They're great for a lot of things, but for stand up not so much, especially when we're counting on laughs in real time and things. And I was like, how do I fix this? how do I fix this? And also, why can't we earn money? Like, how do I fix some of these problems? And so I started just thinking in terms of how do I solve my problems? And if I'm having these problems, I know my friends are having these problems because I've been doing this for many years and this is all we talk about. So, and while I was in New York, I had managed an improv theater. Nobody's getting paid. It's just that's how this is how this industry is. How do I change that? So during COVID, I had actually been accepted right before COVID. I was accepted into grad school at UC Irvine, University of California. And then, of course, school started during COVID. And here I am now doing grad school online during the pandemic. But and I majored in innovation and entrepreneurship because I was like, and the reason I chose that is um, I had spent so many years in comedy and acting and all the things. I'm like, I also need a community that is doing other things that I can create a business outside of the industry. And how do I go about doing that? There's certain things I've been so far from the business world. How do I immerse myself back into it? So that's why I decided to go back to grad school at the age of 50 and fully immerse myself into that and like figure out if I'm having this problem, other people are having problems. How do I scale that? And so when I graduated, you know, I was ready to move forward with Plauzzable and build a team and build a product. And that's what I did.
Amazing. And you said something that I always tell people because it's something that I live by. You said that this idea for plausible was just rolling around in your head and it was like a scratch that you had to itch.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
for me, I feel like anytime something is bothering me that much, like my spirit, my mind, whatever is just really telling me I need to do something. It's like that I have to do it because it would bother me forever if I
Hmm.
didn't. And I think that's how I've been with a lot of decisions I've made in my life. And usually when you do, you're at least at peace with making that decision. And it obviously sounds like you made a lot of really good decisions based on that. And so it's
Yeah,
great to
I had to,
listen. Listen
thanks.
to yourself.
I'm glad to hear that I made some good decisions. I had to balance out all the ones that I made that were terrible.
Well, which ones do you think were terrible? What did you learn?
Oh, oh my goodness. I've made so many mistakes in life. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Oh, most of my okay, let's chat about that. So, um, yeah, so I I don't even know where to start. There's so many things I like, of course, like just my move from New York to California. People are like, "Oh, Ian, did you move to, LA for your comedy?" I'm like, I guess you could say that. I moved there for a man, and that turned out to be a joke. I mean, I showed up in California, and a couple weeks later, he changed his mind. I was like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, what have I done? I gave up my apartment in Queens. You know how hard it was to get that, and like,
Well,
wait,
I'll tell
so sorry, go ahead.
no, sorry to cut you off. When you tell that story, it makes me think of somebody I met online years ago. We talked for a long time and we eventually wound up meeting. And I'm so glad that I did that. It wound up not working out. It was a long distance relationship, but it goes back to what I was just saying. Sometimes you just gotta do it, whether
Oh,
it's
yeah. But I made some terrible. That was not a good decision. I stayed and I did what I needed to do to make my life good again. But that was a dumb. I'm not gonna lie, that was a dumb decision. So, if I were to do it again, now knowing where I am today, would I do it? Maybe because maybe there was no other path to get here. But at the time, it was terrible. I can't sugarcoat that and be like, everything's great. No, it was horrible. I was a mess for a very long time. But there's other things, like I had I had been married and divorced a couple of times in the 90s. And, those things, my life is good now, sure. But at the time, those things are devastating and heartbreaking. And, um, you know, so I can't say like, oh, it wasn't that bad. At the time, it was pretty darn bad. Right. I mean, I ask any of my friends, they're like, oh no, you were a mess, you know? Um, but I honestly think like those things, bad things happen. Just and some things are in my control, some things are not in my control, but bad things happen. And I do believe that's part of life. We each get our turn in the barrel, but I think it's inevitable. I'm gonna make mistakes. I'll make poor choices again, I'm sure, without realizing at the time that hindsight's always 2020. Uh, but not 2020, the year 2020.
Yeah.
That was not
No,
good.
I totally
Yeah.
got you. And
Yeah.
I mean,
But yeah.
sometimes that's just life. I mean, I could probably run through the same kind of
Yeah,
Rolodex for those of us old enough to remember a Rolodex. And
I do.
yeah, I could go through the same kind of list, but whether it was a good outcome or a bad outcome, I'm usually glad that I went through what
Hmm.
I went through because
Yeah.
I wound up learning something and it just allowed me to grow moving forward. And I think
Yeah.
that's basically what happened to you and led you to the great place you're in now. And I can say the same about myself. That's just life.
Yeah. I
But
just always, when people ask me about like, oh, what we're, because I think with social media, and I don't know what your experience is, I'm a fan and not a fan all at the same time, right? But I think what happens is people tend to see overnight success, or they tend to see, oh, look at the glamorous life, and truly, like some of them may be successful, but they weren't. It just didn't happen without all of the work and the tears and the blood, sweat, all that stuff beforehand. A lot of times those things are often not seen by a lot of people. And I think for me, it's important to recognize, no, I've made a lot of poor decisions. I made a lot of mistakes in my life. But the difference is that I got back up and kept going. You learn from them, you take the lesson, you take the hit, and then you get up and you try again. And that is where but I don't ever want to downplay and be like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Because I'm sure if I went back in a time machine and talked to myself, I'd be screaming at myself, what are you kidding me? It's not that bad. Of course it's bad. But I think it's time. I think, over time, it's easier to look back at those things and be like, sure. But in the moment, I have to acknowledge that some of those things were really tough. Hmm.
I totally agree with you. Totally understand just listening to you. I've been through some of the same stuff.
Yeah.
And it's important to just be resilient and keep on doing what you do and just listen to yourself, which you clearly did by getting to where you're at now, which, well, we'll try to pick up the mood a little bit and talk about.
No, leave it down here.
No, no, I know you don't want to be down there.
No, I'm not down.
No, I know you're not actually down. You seem
Okay.
perfectly fine. But let's talk of let's
You're
talk
like, I didn't want to talk about any of your failures, Leanne.
no that I mean, hey, like I told you, I just go wherever it goes. I don't really script the conversation too much. It's
Edit,
scripted
edit, edit.
it's scripted a little bit. No, I told you no edits. Very unless
That's
I
fine.
have a session like yesterday where I stupidly had a time bar before recording and the nuts were getting stuck in my throat. It's like, okay. I mean, I listened back to it. It doesn't sound bad at all. I hit mute and did everything I needed to do. But man, don't need a time bar before you speak to somebody. That's talk about making a mistake. That was not a good idea on my part.
Oh
But,
no.
but let's talk a little bit about Plauzzable. So you built this up. It's an awesome idea. What are some of the challenges and rewards? Do you have success stories that you can talk about or speak to? Talk a little bit about that side of it.
Um, with Plauzzable,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so as kind of as I mentioned before. So when I finished school, I started building a team, and then we were able to develop our software, and um, yeah, and then we launched in December of what year is it?
It's
2020. Oh my gosh,
it's
2022. I don't
no,
even
it's
know what day is
2024
it. I
right
don't leave my
now.
house. I don't leave my house anymore.
Oh, I don't either. I live in sunny Florida and I still don't leave the house that
Right?
continue.
I don't even know what day it is. So yeah, we launched just over a year ago. And it's been a wild ride because I am a non-technical founder, and so I don't code. I don't do any of that. But I have a wonderful team who does, thank God, and they do an amazing job, and they're able to understand my vision and make it, reality. So so yeah, so we launched, and then it was all about onboarding people, both comedians and fans, and making sure everything's working and continuing our development. And we're in beta um, right now, and we have a lot of users on there. We have open mics, we have comedy shows, we've had people do podcasts on there with a live audience, and so we have all kinds of things going on, all things comedy. And yeah. So success is the fact that we actually launched a product. That's a huge milestone for us. Having people actually on the platform and using it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is super, super exciting. So yeah, I'm just continuing to move forward with it. And um, I think, you made a great point earlier of how being in comedy and performing is a business, right? And it's a great preparation for being an entrepreneur, because it is it is a lot of, okay, try this, it doesn't work. Again, failure. I'm a fan of failure. I am calling a spade a spade. Like, that doesn't work. Great. Now, okay, so what if we do something else? What if we try this? Success, So it's nonstop. It's like working out new jokes. Some jokes are funny, most jokes are not. And that's like, building a company and finding out what resonates with your users, what is making your customers most happy, what's making it easy for them to use your platform and stuff like that. So I kind of look at it the same way. So just like doing stand up or any improv or anything, my audience feedback, my livelihood depends on it. Same with my company. My livelihood depends on my customers and how they're responding to it. So yeah, that's kind of where it's at. Every day is a whoo, what's happening?
Yeah, I can imagine. So, what is your vision? So, you got a lot of really good things lined up and you're on the right track right now. What's your vision for Plauzzable moving forward? What else do you see yourself doing with it?
Well, I just see myself continuing to build it. I have a lot more in the plans for Plauzzable, and I don't know if you've logged in. So it's basically like an online comedy club. So comedians can log in. They're provided with the scheduling tools, the virtual stage, and the ticketing services. They're independent creators, so they can go in there and set up any of their shows and events that they want. It's all live in real time, and they can see and hear the live audience, and the live audience can see and hear them. Everybody can see and hear each other. When fans log in, they can see the comedian directory, so they can see all the hundreds of comedians on there, what kind of comedy they do, their bios. And then fans have access to the shows listing, kind of like a TV guide. If you think of like, oh, I used to have to go and see what time is something on. Uh, you have to look and see what time is the show, and and then you register for it, and you can log in at real time, and everybody sees and hears each other and laughs online.
Well, speaking of logging in and being a fan or being a comedian, how can people log in? How can they find Plauzzable? How can they work with you or just join in and be a part of the actual joke giving experience, for lack of a better
Yes.
put that?
So great question. It's go to plauzzable.com, plauzzable.com, and you can create a free account either as a fan or a comedian and check out some live events. We'd love to have you there. And if you're looking for me, which I don't know why, no, you can find me on Plauzzable, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Leanne Linsky. I'm the only Leanne Linsky.
Is that really true? Because I was on LinkedIn earlier. I could have sworn I saw another Leanne Linsky. I mean, not that we're here to debate all that, but I
Well,
don't
you
know.
can. It's a bot. No, I don't. As far as I know, I'm the only one. And sometimes people create fake accounts. So maybe I've said that one too many times and someone took a fake account.
No, you're 100% right. So maybe I'm thinking of maybe it was Instagram. I don't know. Maybe that's
Oh,
what.
there's somebody with a fake account with my name on it. I keep reporting them, but um they use my picture. It's not me.
Well,
Yeah.
and that should tell you something about how far you've come. If they're like, hey, I want to be Leanne Linsky, I'm gonna make an account and impersonate and pretend that I'm her. Somebody out there wants to be just like you.
That my luck is probably one of those people who do fake fake comments and stuff for some company.
Well, then that's
That would
like the
be.
bad, that's the dark side of the
I
idea.
always go to the dark side. I'm so sorry, Mark. That's
Yeah.
like in my name. That's why I'm in comedy.
Oh yeah.
Comedians are very dark. We're very dark. If I
Oh, I
didn't
know.
have done all of those silly things in my life, I wouldn't be doing comedy. I would have nothing to talk about on stage.
Well, after listening to three back to back to back just a few days ago, I was like, yeah, some of this is like really wrong. Not that I've never listened to a comedy set, but it's a different experience when you're actually there or actually being a party to,
Mhm.
the act. So yeah, I'm still fresh off that experience. So yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. And I do actually hope that you get the person to stop impersonating you. But it does say something though. It's like, maybe I've made it. So nobody's ever
I-
tried to, be Mark Schmidt that I'm aware of. So
well, I'll get on that then.
I think you should just for my ego.
Oh
Just
my goodness. So not I know we're wrapping up, but there's a documentary on someone who went out and was stalking people, making fake accounts of them and all of their friends.
oh.
Yeah, I just watched it like a week ago. It's terrifying. They were like destroying these people's lives. So be careful if someone creates a little bot on you.
Yeah, in all seriousness, if you're listening and you're a bot creator, please don't actually do that. But I guess you make a good point. But I do think about that. I'm like, man, these people that are like, somebody stole my identity on Instagram, that they didn't steal my account, but they stole my pictures and they're posting
Yeah.
it like it's me. So it's like, oh man, nobody's ever done that for Mark Schmidt. So I mean, I guess maybe I should be happy. This is probably a really bad rabbit hole to go down.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would totally be happy if no one ever did that. Yeah, check out that documentary. It's bananas. I was like, oh my gosh. And then the person reached out to these people and they'd actually respond to those direct messages. I'm like, stop. I'm yelling at the TV. Stop answering the messages. You're fueling the fire. What are you doing? Yeah.
Well, just a few months ago, last year, I was having an issue with some streaming accounts, people were finding my email somehow and trying to sign in. That was actually very frustrating. So I actually do know that that would probably be frustrating, but it's still, there's a little part inside you. It's like that's actually a little bit flattering. But please don't do that to don't do it to anybody, but don't do it to us. And
No. Oh
this is a
no.
terrible rabbit hole. So
Right. We're just going deeper and deeper. See where I'm taking you into the dark side, Mark.
oh boy. Well, yeah, I suppose this is a good place for us to wrap up. So you know where to find the real Leanne Linsky. She is the founder, CEO of Plauzzable with two Z's. And I thank you very much for being on Mark My Words. Hopefully, nobody will ever hack our account or create alternate personalities of us after this episode. And thanks for being on Mark My Words. I really appreciate it. I had a blast.
Thanks, me too. This has been fun.
All righty. I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy day to listen to Mark My Words. If you would like to connect with me beyond the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt, where I will be talking about entrepreneurship, careers, and anything else that is on my mind. You can also connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at Nimrod1979 and Nimrod79 respectively. This podcast also has a page on Instagram at Mark My Words. And finally, if you want to leave me a voicemail or check out what I'm up to with the podcast, come find me at podpage.com/mark-my-words. Thanks again for listening, and I'll be back with a new episode soon. Bye for now.